Just really quickly, would love to give you a little bit more information about the National Grocers Association for those who aren't familiar with it. So if we can pull up the slides, I'm happy to walk you through that, through some of the background there. Great, next slide, please. So NGA is the National Trade Association with more than 1,500 members representing the independent supermarket industry. For those of you who are not aware of what an independent grocer is, we define an independent grocer really by ownership rather than by size. So our members operate a variety of different formats. They range anywhere from single store operators to our largest member that has 250 stores in the state of California. And if you'll go to the next slide, here's just a brief overview. We have members from Alaska to California to New York and Puerto Rico, as well as the large grocery wholesalers within that community. All right, next slide, please. So before we get started into looking at some of the trends, I'd like to go over some of the early responses that we've seen, are not only from our members, but also consumer behavior. On the next slide. Our members, you know, over and over, we've heard this pandemic been described as unprecedented. It continues to be a situation where people need to make shifts to their operations. I was talking with a member the other day and he told me, you know, I've made more decisions during the last 5 months than I have in the last 5 years. And early on, our members saw an increased foot traffic in store, obviously an increased demand for e-commerce solutions. We heard and read in the news media about the huge spikes for cleaning supplies and paper towels, and started to see consumer behaviors shifting. Particularly, I wanted to pull out on this slide the stat that 73% of US consumers believe their finances will be impacted for at least the next 2 months. Now, this is a statistic that was taken back in March. So this is something we're obviously seeing unfold now in real time as the economy continues to stagger and have a hard time in recovery. So no doubt this will have a lasting impact on Americans as we move forward. Next slide. Independent grocers were quick to respond to the pandemic. Here are some quick statistics on some of the areas where we saw our members shift and respond very early on within their operations and how they changed their business. You know, a number of members immediately put up plexiglass, as well as instituted one-way shopping aisles or different limited store hours, and made sure store hours were open to some of those who are on the elderly or immune compromised, as well as, you know, providing employees with PPE. The number one priority was really making sure that their store associates and their communities were safe. Next slide, please. So just wanted to take a look at some of the emerging trends that we're seeing, and hopefully might give us a glimpse of what the new normal might look like. Certainly, I joke with people about having a crystal ball, and it appears as if everybody's crystal ball is back ordered for the time being. But next slide. Here are some of the emerging trends that we've seen, or trends coming on over time. As mentioned, e-commerce certainly saw a spike in that. And it wasn't just those who have previously used e-commerce. We started to see, you know, those in different age demographics become more comfortable with the platform itself, and certainly use the e-commerce platforms. Almost immediately overnight, those independent grocers who were working on an e-commerce platform or solution and didn't have one, they very quickly had to adjust and figure out how they were going to be able to meet this consumer demand moving forward. As stay-at-home orders were in place, shoppers obviously began to eat more at home, and moving forward, we anticipate that they will continue to eat at home as opposed to dine out. We saw increased customer awareness on price. As mentioned, that 73% of Americans who thought moving forward their finances would be impacted. Now we're actually seeing those Americans are reporting less disposable income compared to before the outbreak. Safety became a top priority for members, particularly or for consumers, particularly as we continue to learn more about the virus. Safety is something that consumers have on top of mind. And then lastly, transparency became paramount for consumers as well. Just ensuring that there was that confidence for them to go to the store or purchase items online to ensure food access. Next slide, please. So just digging in a little bit more into each of these topics and providing some key takeaways. As noted, e-commerce or COVID became really an accelerant for e-commerce. Personally, I love to grocery shop. I am one of those who's in the store. I like to feel my produce and see the expiration dates. I plan out my grocery list and I walk the store based on the various departments. I haven't been in a store since March. Unfortunately, I enjoy grocery shopping that much, but I rely heavily on these e-commerce platforms. And I think moving forward, just on a personal note, I'll probably continue to rely on the e-commerce platforms as the convenience of it has proven to be a good value. So really, as grocers take a look at some of their e-commerce solutions, just ensuring that they have that infrastructure and looking for ways that they can differentiate themselves. A lot of that boils down to that experience of the consumer. So it will require training as well for their members, and then communications as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, consumers are eating at home more often. They are looking for ways where they can have some of these contactless meal solutions, grab and go. A number of our members, we heard stories where they shut down their hot bars, as well as some of the deli type of self-service areas. And mentioned earlier, people now are not looking to touch produce as much. So looking for creative ways to provide consumers with the opportunity to deliver on some of these meal solutions, not just dinner time, but as well as lunch and snacks. Additionally, prior to the outbreak, we saw Americans' palates really were starting to shift. They were starting to be introduced to a number of global cuisines, and they're interested in learning about that food and where it comes from. So being able to provide some creative meal solutions is going to be a key differentiator forward. Next slide. Price, there certainly was an increased consumer awareness on price. We anticipate that that will continue. If you kind of look back to 2008 and the previous recession that we were in, consumers were looking for grocers essentially to deliver on areas of value and convenience. And there's a number of variants with consumers. So providing a different variety for their customers so that they can meet where their customer might be able to meet their needs of their customer and their budgetary realities. This is also a really great opportunity for grocers to take a look at their shelves and see what was quickly taken off the shelves during the pandemic. We've certainly seen brand loyalty is not as strong during these times, but certainly an opportunity for them to take a look at the various categories and see what items performed better during this time. Next slide, please. Obviously, safety is going to continue to be key and on top of consumers' minds as we move forward. And building that consumer confidence back, grocers are going to have to communicate. They're going to have to establish best practices and protocols, and then communicate them to their customers to ensure that their customers have that confidence to continue to come back in store. Next slide, please. NJ is excited. We recently partnered with the Worldwide Cleaning Industry Association. They're offering a cleaning and sanitation accreditation program for facilities. It's not just for grocers. They've recently announced that they have rolled out accreditation programs for NFL stadiums, hotels, airlines. So we are excited to announce this program, and you can find more information on that link below. Next slide, please. And then lastly, consumer awareness on trust and transparency. I know Mark from the food industry, this 81% stat came from their research, and I thought it was important to include that because communication is going to be key regardless if you're a small operator or a large national chain. We've heard so many stories of people who are looking for community during these times, especially when they may be limited in how they're getting out. And so they're looking for ways to feel connected to other people. I heard from another member who said that she had a consumer come in or a shopper come into her store and say that I come to you and look for hope just as much as I do groceries. And so being able to really kind of build on that trust and being transparent in your communications is certainly going to be very important moving forward as the relationship between grocers and American shoppers is significantly changing and shifting. Next slide, please. So just wanted to provide you all with a couple of resources that NGA set up really as we started to learn more about the pandemic early on in March. On the next slide, you'll see a resource page that we have on our website, similar to a number of our other partners, industry association partners. Gus earlier had mentioned United Fresh and PMA. Certainly the food industry, FMI has their resources as well, but on the next slide, you will see a page that we've set up that covers best practices. It has updates on what CDC and FDA are rolling out, as well as a place for people to go if they're looking for specific signage and updates on the advocacy front. Next slide, please. So speaking of advocacy, NGA's been on the ground meeting with, or virtually meeting with members from Capitol Hill. There are a couple of key priority areas that we've been working on. And again, we're working not only with members of Hill, but also with our partners and other trade association colleagues and coalitions. But some of the very most important thing is initially grocers and wholesalers and those in the food agriculture world were deemed essential. And they certainly served a very important role to ensure access to food for Americans. They're a key to ensuring that Americans are fed, particularly during this pandemic. So making sure that there are common sense liability protections and shields from lawsuits moving forward is certainly an issue where NGA is going to be working with Congress to approve. Additionally, your employees worked around the clock. I've heard a number of stories and read in the news where it didn't necessarily matter your job responsibilities and roles. Everybody was out taking food off the trucks and putting them on the shelves and just, making sure that they could respond to their customers. So rewarding and recognizing that hard work and those efforts through some tax incentives, tax credits, we think is going to be very important for a number of our members. And then lastly, something that NGA is working on is expanding online SNAP to independent grocers. It's important, particularly as we move forward to difficult economic times, that we can ensure food access to people, particularly those in needs. And oftentimes we've heard independent grocers are those who are in those communities where they serve, whether it's rural or urban, where they're serving a number of communities where there are people of need. And so making sure that they have access to that and that grocers, we remove some of the barriers that independent grocers have in operating such and implementing a program so they can better serve their communities. And then at that, I'm happy to take any questions for folks. We're just so incredibly proud and blown away of all the efforts from our members throughout, the food supply chain. The response has been nothing short of amazing, and we're thankful and proud to represent these people every day. So thank you for that.